Hello and welcome to this video tutorial. Today I'm going to be explaining how to use Spline Flow plugin for 3dsmax and how we can use it to create some interesting geometries using splines and how it can reduce your workflow when creating geometries like these. So to begin this tutorial, I've just drawn some basic splines. I've got some curvy-like objects where I want to make a tunnel, and then I've got two kind of obscure shapes, and I'm going to show and demonstrate how Spline Flow can be used to create some interesting geometries with these. So what I'm going to do is go into splines and just go into KStudio and just go Spline Flow, and you essentially just want to draw out the Spline Flow. And then go into the Spline Flow tab in the Modifiers tab and go pick the first spline, and then I'm going to pick the second one. And as you can see, it starts drawing it off to the side. However, I want to use the rail which I've drawn here, so I'm going to go to pick path, and it will set it along the path, but I want it to link to the path as well. And it's orientated along the z-axis. I want it to be orientated on the x-axis. So now I can start to begin to create some iterations in between these splines. So what I'm going to do is scroll down and use the density scroller. So I'm just going to increase the density. I think that would be a decent amount of rails for this. And you can now begin to adjust the curvature and what happens in between these two. So for example, I could start to adjust that curvature and create that more of a stronger arch along that ridge, or I could flatten it out a bit more against that to more adjust to that original rail here. However, I think I might keep it as to how it was before, like that. You can also adjust the amplitude, which also makes some changes to the curvature as well, and you can go through each of these modifiers and change how you might want your geometry to look. You can also adjust the scale, rotation, and offset of each of the splines. So for example, let's say I want to flip this spline. I'm going to scroll down, and then maybe I possibly want to rotate in the z-axis. So I can rotate like that, and that essentially flattens out the geometry. Maybe I might want to rotate it in the y-axis instead, and you can see how it starts to create some interesting curvature, and you can use this for some very interesting parametric modeling. You can see that one does some interesting stuff as well to it, so you can play around with all these transformations and adjust your geometry to your liking. So let's say now I want to start working on these two splines, and so I'm just going to repeat the same process. So I'm just going to go into KStudio and create a new spline flow, and then just I'm going to pick my star, and then I'm going to pick the circle. And then I'm going to go through that same process of selecting the path and link to path. And this is where I want to adjust the density, and as you can see, it starts to create iterations which are following in between the star and the ellipse. And as you can see, the scale is quite large, so I've got the donut selected at the moment. I can adjust this scale like this, and maybe I might do so for the star as well. That was set to, maybe it was the donut. There we go. So now, as you can see, we can create some really interesting geometries through this Spline Flow plugin. And what I can do also is add a sweep, which allows us to add some structure. I'm going to just adjust the length and width of this sweep. And as you can see, you can create some very interesting geometries using this plugin, and it can be quite helpful in reducing your workflow time. So that is all for this tutorial, and thank you for watching.